So in my research, what I'm trying to understand is the role of citizen-based initiatives in management of urban social ecological systems. I'm trying to answer questions like, why do people engage in such initiatives? How do they collaborate, connect to each other? And how are they able to influence the management of these spaces and other actors that are involved in this management? So part of my research has been on a network called Green Life in Bangalore in India. And rather than being a formal organization, it's more of a web-mediated platform for citizens to connect and collaborate throughout the city. And what we've seen is that an important difference between these types of networks and formal organizations is that networks like Green Life make prioritizations that a formal organization might not have. So we think that this means that the network is more intended to be a platform for information exchange and knowledge exchange among citizens, rather than being a formal organization that can lobby effectively with city authorities and so on. And we also think that this is particularly important in a city like Bangalore that's changing very rapidly, with both having the population changing and also the actual urban environment going under very rapid change. And in this situation, it's more important to have a support structure for civic engagement rather than having an established organization that can deal with problems that have been present for a long time. So in my research I focused on Bangalore, and I can't confidently say anything about how present networks like Green Life are in other Indian cities. But I do know that there are other networks in Bangalore that are emerging that have a sort of similar function. One example of this is a network that is forming between local lake restoration groups. So Bangalore's has hundreds of lakes, but many of them are threatened by the growing city. And there has been, and there is a network that is forming between them that is very similar to Green Life in the sense that it's also providing information and knowledge support for local groups. But it's also different in terms of it being a network of groups rather than only individuals, and also that it's more focused on specific places and it's focused on lakes. So that makes it a little bit different, but also it shares some similarities. The lake network is also more geared towards actually sort of lobbying and even collaborating with city authorities on these issues. So because of these reasons, there's a lot to learn. And the education that takes place in both of these networks that I've studied is both in the form of the peer-to-peer learning, that members share experience that they have had and lessons that they've learned from their own engagement, but also the networks function as a way for members to connect with experts in various fields. This can be experts in ecology, in how you restore an ecosystem. It can be people that are experienced in interacting with authorities to know what department to go to or which individuals to contact. And also legal expertise in terms of how do you go to court if the authority that you're working with is not doing what they're supposed to do. How do you take them to court, or how do you file various petitions or litigations and so on. So there's a lot of learning, and I think this is also something that members of these networks have pointed out to me, that it's a source of information, it's a source of knowledge. However, Bangalore is also a city where a lot of these types of initiatives have not happened before, or at least it hasn't really been documented. So there are a lot of unknowns and untested ideas, and not necessarily one solution that is correct one or better. I mean, they simply will have different outcomes depending on who you are. So in addition to the learning, or maybe another form of learning is just discussing the consequences of different approaches. And this again comes back to more maybe peer-to-peer learning, but it's a sort of a constant process that goes on in these networks. One example of this is when you restore lakes. One approach that has been common for a long time is to go for what's called a soup bowl design, where you try to dig out as much as possible so that the lake can hold a lot of water and reduce the risk for flooding, for example, in nearby areas. But a lot of the newer groups that are engaging in lake restorations, that are pushing for what they call a more original lake design, which has a more sloping bottom surface. And this is more similar to how these lakes were thought to have functioned before, and is also promoting more biodiversity because you have more variations in terms of habitats for birds and other wildlife. So I think that the groups and the networks that I'm studying are important for education, or relevant for education, not only because they educate and spread information towards their members, but they're also in themselves gathering and synthesizing knowledge about the work that they're doing and the context that they're doing the work in.